Hello and welcome to Red's Business and Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Barnes.
I'm your co-host, Brad Ferris.
And I want to first introduce our special guest from Red, our founder, Nigel. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jackson. Really appreciate it. So, Nigel Hine, founder of Red. We set out on a journey 6 years ago to reimagine everything done digitally, make people's lives better through technology, and here we are, still doing it, reimagining technology with podcasting. So, yeah, thank you for having me here.
No worries. And today we've got our guest who is from Ausenco, the global mining and oil and gas giant, based across 26 offices in 14 countries with projects with over 80 locations. Recently also named one of the top 10 most innovative CIOs to follow in 2021, Anuj Anand. Do you want to, Anuj, thanks for coming on, and did you want to go through your background first?
Sure, mate. Firstly, thank you so much for having me on. Probably the most high-tech setup I've been in a long time and ever. Probably the second most ever. So well done.
Thank you.
Already shows the passion and technology over here, and super excited to be here. So I guess I started probably in engineering 13 years ago as an engineer. So
what about before Ausenco?
Before Ausenco, it was a company called Alcan Engineering, now Rio Tinto Alcan. So that was my first job, and got my first job as a graduate. So I did my work experience over there, and then converted the work experience to full-time work. I did try going on a 6-month sabbatical through Europe, but that got canned because it was on one of the biggest projects done in Australia in Northern Territory in an area called Gove. And the project was running full swing, so it was pretty much either stay on the project or go and never come back.
Yeah, see you later.
Yeah, and I always thought, the advice the old man gave at the time, you can always go on holiday. You can always do that, and it's been about 15 years and it still hasn't happened.
That's a funny one. I got the exact opposite advice from my dad, and I don't think he realised how quickly. He said, "Mate, you're young once, so you better enjoy it. He said, you're young once, you're going to be old and working forever, so enjoy it while you can."
So I think a key differentiate over here around, I'll say it since we're among friends, around brown parents versus other parents. It's like, you will work, you will be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer, and that's it.
No choice.
Everything else will follow. That's right.
And then you joined Ausenco, and so as an engineer first?
Yeah, so I started in the instrumentation controls department and spent, I guess, some of my informative years in the engineering, I guess, project side. So went to site a couple of times and always had an aptitude for technology. So from the start, even at Alcan, there was a point of time where I decided that I wasn't going to sit down and manually fill in 2,760 data sheets, quite elaborate data sheets, and you'd have to read a drawing and then go in and type it in, and then read the drawing, look at the process data, go and type it in, and there was a lot of it. So I had a full year to do it, so decided there was an easier way to do this, and may or may not have broken through their database and figured out, wrote an Excel script and connected the Excel spreadsheet to the database and made sure that I filled in all the data within a few months versus the year that was allocated. And then they realized that I must know a bit about technology. So got told that I could help out the IT team who needed some help at the time. And that was my first foray in tech, doing some work experience there. And when I moved to Ausenco, it was actually very similar in that they needed assistance with the design systems and the design tools, so the 3D design tools that they used along with the engineering side. So I helped build that bridge between the two, and that was the constant focus for me in working on projects, helping use technology that actually made sense for the projects versus just technology. So it was an interesting avenue and an interesting background compared to everyone else that I meet within the technology space. So
definitely.
So spend a lot of time doing that. And then at some point of time, one of the projects that I worked on and built this software platform for the project, they voted or put it into a contest for most innovative solutions on a project, and it saved them a fair bit of money. So that actually won an award in London in 2014. And that's when I guess the C-suite started taking a bit of notice, going, Anuj must know a bit about technology. He's done a few things in the past. He's helped us make a tangible difference, 2 projects. And that's when they called me into what I call the principal's office. I remember sitting down in West End, I think it was level 3. And the C-suite was level 5, right, the penthouse. And, one of the EAs came and tapped me on the shoulder saying, Neil and Greg, who was our CIO and CTO at the time, want to talk to you. And I was like, oh, man, I've done something wrong. I'm in trouble for something. I'm going to better pack my bags and get ready to be walked out after this. And so I did pack my bags, and then I go up, and I had a very different trajectory. I was always part of a high potential leadership program in the company, and always thought, I'm going to go into GM of engineering, run an office, move to a different country potentially, and build my run rate that way. And when I walked in, they're like, "Oh, Anuj, sit down," and very casual setting in the principal's office. And I was like, "Yeah, what's going on?" And they're like, "Have you ever thought about a career in IT?" I was like, no, don't really like those guys. Never give me permission to do anything. Have to take it myself. No, love the guys. So that's how it started off. And as they say, the rest is history.
And well done. It's pretty impressive, focusing on systems and realistic outcomes for the business. And then there you go, straight into CIO. Did you want to touch on an overview of Ausenco, who they are?
Yeah, for sure. So Ausenco is widely spread, as you said, quite geographically spread around the place, about 3,000 people globally, give or take. My team is about 55 people globally across the various regions. So we're very big in the engineering services, mostly focused around the mining space. Everything that we do and the core of what we do is around mining. We've just moved into the ESG space. Big focus for us over the coming years is around that ESG space, really helping our clients evolve as well. So we've just made some investments when it comes to software, when it comes to technology related to ESG, measuring our own outputs, and then using that and the work that we're going to do to help our clients evolve as well.
And Anuj, I'm interested to know, I know you've probably spent the last 6 years in North America. The difference you see between what the North Americans from an adoption of technology versus Australians, right? Because I know you spent a bit of time working with IBM and the Watson and the AI, BI space. So anything you can share that, good insights that you've been, playing in the big league, so to speak, and, little old Aussie down under, what can we embrace, or what can we do better?
Yeah, great question, Nigel. And I think, I see it over here, being back for about 7 months now, and, quite focused on the technology, meeting a lot of vendors, meeting a lot of clients, a lot of people in this space. The marked difference, I would say, is the adoption, like you just mentioned, Nigel, and how quickly people are ready to take the plunge versus what's going on over here. I'm not saying that, we're that backward in Brisbane, little old Brisbane, like for what it's worth, it's actually doing quite well when it comes to technology. There's a lot of great companies like yourselves in this area, playing in this field. However, in Canada or Silicon Valley of the North, which is Vancouver, Brad, you've seen it, and so close to San Francisco. A lot of the startups, a lot of the technology, a lot of the offshoot from Silicon Valley does go into Vancouver, so it's got a great tech space. It's got a great little community when it comes to technology. Very good to get talented resources in that region as well. But again, adoption's quite fast. People are ready to adopt and actually take the risks and make the investments versus what I've seen over here. And I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So any lessons, I guess, in your time here, only been 7 months, like, would you see that Australians are probably a bit too conservative? We should be taking a few more calculated risks? Is that
definitely. And it's one of those things, like, it is that practical or reality-based approach that I often think about and talk to my team about, so when it comes to newer technologies, you shouldn't just jump in because it's new. Right? Like when it comes to artificial intelligence, there was this big buzz. When it came to VR and AR, there was this big buzz, and everyone made all these huge investments and leaps overseas. And I guess the piece that was missing from that whole thing is what the realistic output of that was going to be. What was the goal going to be? Just because it's cool technology doesn't make it great for yourselves, right? Like, where's the value going to be? For ourselves, we went, when it comes to VR and AR, we actually went with the approach of, what the marked difference for us was going to be bringing the remote or site-based travel, etc., to the office. So you don't actually have to be at site. Remote mind. You don't have to travel. You don't have to leave your family. You could put in a headset and virtually be at the site if that was possible. So that was the outcome or the goal that we were trying to achieve. We may or may not have got to it, but we actually set up, magic milestones is what we call them, to say whether we wanted to go or no go after we were able to prove technology at a certain point. So we would set these milestones and make most of our investment aligned to those milestones. So we would always say, all right, gate one's going to be X. If we achieve it, we make a go, no go decision at that point of time versus saying that we're going to spend $500,000 and, get to this point, straight away. So even when it came to IBM Watson, we made our investments quite, staying quite cognizant of the fact that we might not achieve that goal. However, if we did tick the boxes, we would get a lot closer to ticking that, meeting the goal or the milestone. So, yeah.
Yeah, good framework. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. And it's worked so far for us, making sure that the goal is realistic, making sure that we're setting something that's going to be important to the business. I feel with a lot of proof of concepts, a lot of new technologies and new adoptions, new implementations, people over promise. And, that's the problem, right? Like, you can always go, and it's up to us as leaders within the business to actually bring a reality check to that situation, going, well, okay, how are you going to achieve it? What value is that going to make to the business? And for myself, actually coming from the floor, I can actually see some of those tangible benefits. Like, it will make a difference if we can get, a comminution expert on the phone or, with a VR headset, being able to look at what's going on the site, versus actually traveling, and then they can look at about 20 sites versus just being at one site.
Yeah, that's so cool. So how much of that, how widely implemented is kind of the VR AR?
Not very much right now, Brad. So I guess we didn't tick the boxes at an early stage. So we actually went through those milestones and went, all right, we've bought the headset. We've actually invested in some programmers that specialize in it. So we've made a bit of traction. We've got 3D models that are available to be viewed through a headset. So it's not just on a screen. Like, you could actually put a headset on. You could do a walkthrough. It does take a lot of work to get to that point.
So what are the roadblocks? Is it software, the hardware, communication on site, change management?
At this stage, I'd say the big problem for us is the time it takes, with developing the software and like taking the model. If it was a click of a button type of thing to say, actually, you've got the model, a 3D model, that you can view on a screen, great. And like, if it was click of a button or, minimal investment to go from A to B, that would make it a bit of a realistic outcome. At this stage, there's still a lot of programming, with Unity or whatever it is to actually go through and get to that next level.
Conceptually, it sounds so promising, but it
sounds great, right?
It's always so difficult to implement.
So when you go to level 6, I think you said where the executives are.
Level 5.
Level 5.
Level 6 is when you parachuted out.
Do you go through that magic milestone approach when you're trying to pitch like a new technology innovation to them?
Yeah, all the time. So every time we go through any of these new technologies, innovative ideas, we do get the buy-in from a lot of the C-suite, and it usually takes like 2 or 3 people to actually be heavily invested in the idea, apart from just myself. I can say, hand on heart, I am quite the optimist, and I look at a lot of the technology and say, this has got great value, like Brad said, with the VR piece, it was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be game changing, and then it might take someone else, one of my colleagues or, to actually go through and, test it out a bit with me going, is it going to get to this point? Have you got enough off the gates or magic milestones that we spoke about in place to ensure that you're going to get to that? Or how much money are we going to spend before we potentially don't achieve anything? So it's important to actually make sure that it's not just me making some of those decisions.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Well, just on that, Anuj, it's interesting, right? So you've worked with a lot of vendors, a lot of partners. Like, in the business case, putting that advice, coming up with something that makes sense from a commercial point of view, how do you as a lead-in CIO lean on your vendors for that help and that assistance, right? So as a technology business, the more we can learn to help, partner. Can you talk a bit about that?
100%, Nigel. I think this is a conversation that I've had with multiple people that I work with. It's that understanding of our business, right? So you can't just have a blanket business case that you think it's going to be a one size fits all. And I think the relationships that we establish, as we do the same thing with our clients. We try to actually get into the business and understand what they're doing, what's going to make a difference to them to help them prepare that business case. You might never get to the point of knowing all the nuances, but if you actually understand what we're trying to do, what sets us apart, I think that makes the biggest difference to actually develop a business case together and co-collaborate on a business case versus just saying, we believe it's going to be X, Y, Z, and that's the value that we're going to bring to it, without really understanding what the business is and what we're trying to do.
Yep.
So, and I think the only way that you can get to it is developing that relationship and having these conversations about what sets Ausenco apart or what sets any business apart.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So getting to know the business, so that's a bit of advice you've got for IT partners. What other advice would you have for selecting a good IT partner?
I think the biggest thing for me is having that relationship, being able to sit down and, anyone on my team will tell you this. I think, even the conversations I've had with Nigel, anyone will say this, we're not going to work with anyone. We're not going to sit down and, have a beer or coffee with, I want to do that, at a personal and professional level. I think what it really boils down to, and I'll try to play this out, is a lot of the time things might not go through, and when it comes to technology, it's quite binary, right? Zeros and ones. So there will be points of time where the technology will not work or operate as you expected it to do so. I think the worst case scenario is that you go back to a service level agreement and say, no, you said that it was going to be down, at a minimum for an hour a month, and it's down for an hour and 30 minutes. So now you have to give us this credit back. I'd rather sit down with the person and just say, hey, this happened, or it's happened constantly. How do we get around it?
Yeah.
And that can only happen if you've got a relationship with someone versus, just going through and being very transactional. I'll send you an email, fill in the paperwork, we'll buy the software. And there's a lot of vendors like that, and when they don't perform, you get to that point, well, here's the SLA, you owe us this, and give it to you. But I think the most important thing is to be able to sit down together and work through this.
And get a strong relationship. And that's great.
Partnerships,
Partnerships.
The success of your role in your organisation, and which is really the power of the partnerships, right?
That's 100% right.
So just on that vein, what keeps you up at night as a CIO going into 2023? What worries you?
I think every CIO or CISO will say this at this point of time. It's cybersecurity, or losing information, or having a breach through any framework, any partners that you're working with. One of those little nuances. Making sure that you're as airtight as possible. It's getting to a point of time, as we see almost on a weekly basis, that you might not plug every hole. So it's that's really what keeps me up at night at this point of time.
And with a global team, I guess, your challenges are, exponential compared to so many others. Can you talk through some of the, I guess, what you're seeing is done elsewhere in the world, best practice? Is there anything that you can share in that regard?
Yeah, look, Nigel, it's a hard one, right? The more you share, the more you open yourself up as well, right? What vendors you use, what strategies you use, it's at that point of time right now, whatever you have or say can be used against you as well.
Sure.
Not to share it, I'd love to share it with you guys, at a personal level. But, I think what I see now more than what I've seen before is the ability to have the right partnerships in place, whether it's Arctic Wolf or, CrowdStrike or any of these companies that we work with or talk to. It's making sure that you've got a robust structure in place, a robust support mechanism in place, that if something does go wrong, you've got the right team to help you recover.
Yep.
Or it's to minimize that downtime. I think one of the things that we're focusing on next year is around making sure that we've got the right DRP in place to recover and have the right recovery strategies in place to make sure that we're able to, come out off any breach.
You can't get the risk. You just cannot, by definition, get it to zero. So
yes,
those mitigation practices you put in place, partnerships, policies, controls, all that kind of stuff, and just being diligent is critical. And that's what we're seeing a lot of as well.
More generally speaking, Anuj, what advice would you have for other CIOs in Australia to look at first? Would it be compliance, just who they're partnering with, like selecting a cyber partner? Like, what advice would you give to them?
I would 100% say to have the right partnerships in place and the right agreements in place before anything else. Because, you're never going to be able to tick every box. And you might not have every answer yourself. But if you have the right partners, they may be the ones that bring to you, different things or different scenarios that you might never see being so involved in your own business. And we've had that over the past couple of years, right? Like we've had multiple partners come into the business going, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And I feel there's a bit of a trap in this whole piece as well, because you could overcommit, and then when's the end of it? We could theoretically spend millions and millions of dollars trying to cover ourselves, but what value is that going to be? Right? Going back to the business value, I feel like we're getting to a point now where the cost of cyber is potentially more expensive than the cost of what we're trying to protect.
Back to pens and paper.
Yeah, it could be the answer.
Yeah, it's a scary time, and especially as CIO, when you partner with someone, you're putting your neck on the line, right? Because we touched on this a couple of weeks ago when the ex-CISO of Uber didn't report a breach, and he's facing up to 8 years jail time.
Yeah.
Well, didn't report
Personally.
and then covered it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I was listening to something about that on the weekend actually, and I think he was more getting pinned because he was covering it up than for the the actual breach itself. But it's definitely an interesting time, and we've definitely had some different conversations in here, right? When it's like, okay, because at the end of the day, it's what price you put on the risk, like you're saying, and it's the topic around many boardrooms. The AICD just released their cyber governance principles for Australian directors. And the conversations we've been having is around, okay, well, you've kind of got your total cost of the risk. You'll mitigate so much of that risk with controls, process, partnerships, tools, etc. And then that last bit is the insurance. But even that's moving all over the place, like the way premiums be calculated. And I think insurance companies have been burned, so they don't know how to price it. And then I don't even want to know what they'll be saying now. Oh well, Medibank didn't have insurance, so they might have left a bit of room for everyone else.
Yep. But they couldn't. Like I read something or heard something the other day that they couldn't get insurance.
Oh really?
Yeah. They were at a level. I think that they required and
too high risk.
And I think that's potentially, like I have been in a session recently as well a few weeks ago with a few other CIOs and stuff, and the conversation was around cyber insurance, and a lot of them were saying, that not only, and we're saying this as well, like not only are the insurers minimal that will offer cyber insurance, previously till 3 years ago, you could go out and get 10 different options. Now you get one or two.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much take it or leave it. So your premiums are almost doubled. The amount the insurance payouts get to are halved. So theoretically, you're getting quarter of what you used to get prior to a few years ago.
Yeah, it was interesting. And it was Rob, I think, from McGrath-Nicol. It kind of surprised me, but didn't surprise me, I guess. And that he was saying businesses are electing not to take the money that they would spend on insurance and just double down on their internal controls and spend the money on a cyber program internally. So
I've even heard of businesses self-insuring.
Yeah, that was kind of the phrase he was.
Yeah. One thing that even cyber insurance, no matter how good your policy is the reputation hit though. Like all these big brands that have been hit, what dollar value would you put on that? Your name being front page on every newspaper.
Yeah, you get slammed.
Yeah, it's definitely not good.
And again, talking about technology, one thing that came up in conversation today, talking about newer technology, we were talking about geolocations and, with trucks and things like that. And quite topical, talking about Uber. I think it was over the weekend in North America, they're talking about targeted advertising. Have you heard about this one?
No.
So it's targeted advertising based on geolocation. So say Brad catches an Uber to go to Howard Smith Wharves.
I was there on Saturday.
Yeah, see, I saw you.
It's working.
But the Uber will have a screen in the background, in the back seat, that will target ads to you going to that particular location, and will say that, he's gone from here to there, so it'll actually pick this. And again, now it's getting to your personal information that it knows you're going from here to here. It'll target ads at you, potentially that are restaurants at Howard Smith Wharves, and influence your decisions to get to that point of time. The big outcry on this whole thing was in the States, when with the abortion debate going on right now, et cetera, is like when someone's actually going through to go to a different state or go through for various reasons, trying to not be known, now their personal information is actually out there as well. So yeah, it's a very topical one. And, again, when it comes to cybersecurity, you don't want that getting out there. And Uber's been caught with their pants down multiple times.
Don't have the best record with all this stuff, do they?
Holding personal information, it's scary if someone got into Google, how much data they'd have on everyone. I mean...
Yeah, I just don't know if they'd ever get to the point where they can analyze any of that information. So that's what I'm holding on to. Is like, you've just got so much information, you never know what to do with it or how to actually break that down. So
yeah, it's true. Probably worse if it's Medicare, because they just have like your personal, identifying information, nothing else. Where Google's probably too much, doesn't matter. They get in.
So Anuj, as a CIO, you've got three roles really. You've got a strategic role, protection, maximise the asset, and then an innovation role, right? So changing gears a little bit, you just touched on a bit of innovation, but from an ESG point of view, can you share some of the technology innovation that you guys are going to be faced with over the next 5-10 years?
I feel in its infancy right now, right, Nigel? Like everyone's talking about it. There's so many different variances to it, and I feel like none of the software vendors have really cracked the code when it comes to ESG just as yet.
Very early days, right?
Very early days. Yeah. Everyone's coming and selling it to you, going, oh, we've got this. And then you say, well, who's used it before? Or where have you used it? And they're like, no one yet, but, you'll
we
get
want
to
you
be
to be the first.
Yeah, we'll get you to be an early adopter. Yeah. So I think we're at that stage, but we have just signed with a platform pretty early days, so I'm not going to say their name, but we've just signed with a really great platform where we think, and we've gone through the same analysis that, I spoke about earlier, making sure it's the right fit for our business. We'll be able to get reports, publish our own monthly ESG statistics, in a single pane of glass, change that to make sure the inputs are correct going into this and get the outputs. And then hopefully we'll get to a point where we'll get our clients to use the same systems and tools that we actually have in place as well.
Fantastic.
So again, I feel early days, but definitely a focus area for us, and we'll work through it with certain vendors to crack that code.
I wanted to change gears a little bit and discuss something more relevant to, I guess, Red and technology. We've noticed a massive growth in co-managed IT services, or that hybrid support model where you've got some internal team looking at certain IT support functions and then you outsource other parts of that. What's your take on that? Good, bad, or thoughts?
Yeah, look, we went down this path a few years ago where we went, like I'd say we had a bit of a, top three approach. We narrowed down to look at where managed services would take us and what it would look like for Ausenco. In the end of it, by the time we actually got to the point where we were getting the presentations and the numbers, it actually didn't get to even close to the numbers we wanted it to in a full managed service model. So we do use managed services for certain things, like when it comes to network as a service and certain bits and pieces. However, I think the answer to your question is, like, my belief is a hybrid model is the way to go. Keep some control and make sure that we actually, like, I'd go back to the most basic economic principles of comparative advantage, do what we do best and, get someone else to do what they do really, really well to do it really well as, themselves. So that's the theory that I've used. And I think the most legs, for success would be around that model. However, it has to be cost effective while still having the right element of physical touch, and that white glove service. Currently within our business, most of the people will tell you that they do have that, ability to just pick up a phone and someone will be there in like 5 minutes, right? Like, if you're in the office or pick up the phone virtually, on a Teams call, and someone will be able to assist you quite quickly. One of the things that we found as we started testing this out in just service delivery was there was a lack of that, and there might be, a bit of a transactional piece that we just spoke about with a vendor/client relationship, even internally, like our clients are actually everyone sitting on the floor.
Hardware being your size, I guess, as well, right? I guess that's the different thing, is it has to be a right fit partner in there, right? Whereas you got 3,000 people, so many countries and offices and that kind of thing, it'd be pretty hard to, just fully outsource that commercially, I'd imagine. So your approach and advice for similar size organizations would be to assess what your internal team is good at, and then what makes sense to outsource.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. Like bring a partner like Red. Say you're the best in infrastructure or managed. Whether it comes to Microsoft. And that set of tools, that I think that should be the focus area, and say, like, keep your internal team, make sure that their focus areas on certain things, that level 1 or level 2 support, and then like everything else can be behind the scenes when it gets escalated. Yeah.
I want to circle back on the cybersecurity comments you made earlier. How has cybersecurity evolved you've been at Ausenco 13 years now, but since you went into the IT realm 5+ years ago, how's it evolved from back then till now?
I can honestly say, like at the start, what we would look at in terms of cybersecurity was what antivirus protection you have on your laptop.
Yep.
Now you can think of about 10 different things straight at the top of the list. Like, have you got ITP? Have you got the right AD solution? Have you got multi-factor authentication? Have you got all these other things in place versus I feel like the conversation of what antivirus is on your computer, no one cares about anymore. Right, like that's literally gone out the door. Whereas 5 years ago, it was like, oh, have you got Sophos or have you got, McAfee or whatever it was, back in my day. Sorry, Jackson, might not be your day.
It's only 5 years you've been doing that to your own. But no, I agree. It was, it used to be the antivirus tool, and my antivirus tool is better than your antivirus tool to pick up this much malware. But now that's completely out the window.
No one talks about that anymore.
Well, the conversations have moved, right? That was antivirus is more a protection mechanism. Now it's more strategic defense. Like you've got to have XDR, you got to have the human firewall, you got to have all of the pen tests, and it's quite pervasive.
Yeah.
So many attack surfaces have evolved, right?
That's interesting. With 3,000 staff, though, right? Obviously, like people can sometimes, in this instance, be your weakest line of defense around training, awareness, testing, that kind of stuff. Do you have
We have, like, that is literally one of the things that we looked at a year and a half ago when we started having this conversation. We could have, again, we could spend millions of dollars on, cyber in a whole bucket of funds. However, the end user was really the weakest link.
Yeah.
So what we've done over the past 18 months is we have a monthly awareness campaign, pulled up the statistics actually today for various teams, because we're talking a few of the teams, and like over the year, how have they performed, and everyone's done pretty well. Most teams have actually like learned, like we used to have a click rate that was well below industry average, and now we're well above the industry average in doing a lot better.
That's cool. And you've got those data points
We've got the data points, which is the most important thing, right, Brad? Like, we've gone through and like we've had a couple of campaigns where 0%, not anyone's click. Maybe they're easier sort of phishing emails, but still, not one click across a couple of campaigns is brilliant for us.
Good.
That's really good compared to where we started off with. I think one of the campaigns we had a 37 or 38% click rate where the industry average was 15.
Yeah.
So seeing those numbers start coming back, it actually goes to the fact that we're making the right investments. We're actually doing this. There was points of time where I thought we need to actually pivot and look at a different strategy because this is not working.
That's pretty good. That's cool to see the benefits, and that's like cyber awareness training is fairly low cost, really, for pretty high value. So that's definitely something we're big advocates of. So it's good to hear that you've that's some really good numbers, actually.
Good
work.
And I'd never say that we've cracked the code when it comes to it, but I think it actually goes to show, to your point, is that it does make a difference. If you can educate the people, and when we have a new starter, they actually go through cybersecurity awareness training.
Yeah.
Never was the case before. So. And again, it might take one single click. That's all it takes, right? Like, so anything more than 0% is a fail, theoretically.
Yeah.
But, I think we're starting to get a bit more comfortable that we are on the right track and we are educating the people with the right platforms and the tools versus, we had our strategy session at the start of the year in Canada. We were actually thinking of, changing the way we're doing things and what other, holistic approaches can we use to start teaching people about cybersecurity and when not to click. But then the numbers are starting to prove themselves, which is good.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well done. Conscious of time, we've gone for a while. And Nigel, about any other questions you guys had?
Am I allowed to ask another one?
Go on.
So I do have two.
Okay.
Sure.
We can always cut it back. I'm interested around that innovation piece. Is there anything else you can talk about that's cool, that's tech that you're not playing with but you'd like to play with? if you can talk about it.
Yeah, 100%, Brad. I love talking about it because it's something that I started a few years ago was around data as an asset. Like I've always thought that that's really the value for a company like ours. And the more you look at it these days, with again going back to the cyber topic, just touching on it, with people losing data, that's probably the most critical piece. And for a company like ours, it is pretty important to like leverage our data. And I don't think we've done enough in that space, which is why we started looking at alternatives. And, the IBM Watson was one of the examples that, we spoke about offline, but, trying to leverage our data, our historic data. Ausenco has been around for 30 years and we've got 30 years of information. Some of it's still in files and folders. Some of it's just scanned drawings. However, there's a lot of value in almost every bit of data. It might be how not to do something, even though majority of the time is how to do something, but, it might be a good example on how not to do something. Yeah. But, we haven't got that single pane of glass of, show me a gold project that we did in remote Africa, between 2006 and 2008. So yes, people know, like I know where to find that information because I've been around for a while, but, not someone starting tomorrow will be able to find that information easily. So that's really a focus area for us next year. And we're trying to come up with the right data platform and single pane of glass using AI, saying, Brad started today. What is he going to work on? All right, he's an electrical engineer. He might want to look at, he's working on a project that's a gold plant in remote Asia. What else can we show him that could help him, hit the ground running?
Yep.
So that type of AI approach is really what we're thinking about now.
It's amazing. We're working on similar things. We're a data stroke business as well, effectively. But just being able to have that insight at your fingertips. Yeah. It's good that, yes, I know it's there and I can spend 3 hours and I can dig it up, but how much quicker I can make better decisions having that information kind of at my fingertips. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it's like we want to get there. Again,
it's hard.
We're not there yet.
It's
difficult,
hard.
Right? Yeah, and I don't think, like I've spoken to so many companies about this and, different vendors and different, partners of ours, etc. It's a very difficult one, and people will come and sell you like a data lake house. And what's the latest one I heard? Something else to do with lakes and fishing, but data
cottage maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, there's all these solutions out there, but finding the right one and making sure that it is ticking the boxes that we need from a realistic and practical purpose is the difficult piece to the puzzle.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then my other question, more personal, and I don't think we covered this at the beginning, but why did you go to Canada?
So interestingly, this was my second stint in Canada. I did go in an engineering role in 2011.
Okay.
So that was more around engineering design systems, making sure that we standardize across North and South America with the right tool set, the right standards, right procedures, making sure that a product coming out of Vancouver or Santiago or Lima looks the same as a drawing coming out of Brisbane.
Yep.
And that was it. Loved it. Came back to Australia, moved into a technology role. And some of the thinking was around, building the team and growing the team with the resources that were available in Vancouver versus the resources that were available in Brisbane.
For the reasons you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Yep. And we did. So a lot of the core infrastructure team is actually based out of Vancouver compared to Brisbane.
And then last question, and the reason you came back?
Family.
I thought that.
Yeah, more than anything else.
Happy
Plus
to be
work
home.
And liking it so far.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Good one.
We've gone a little bit longer than usual, but I think if you say Canada and data anymore, Brad's going to ask for your autograph. Might start to wrap up.
Brad and me hanging out every weekend now.
We'll leave Nigel. Just leave these two in here for a little bit. Thanks for just coming on. I really appreciate it. And thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for coming in.
Fun
Cheers.
conversation.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Anuj.